Record.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Career Boost call for April. First of all, finally, happy spring. I think actually in New York, we finally hit spring. Today we stayed a little bit above 60. It's supposed to stay warm through the week. And that actually is making me feel a lot better. It has been a long, long winter. I'd like to welcome those who are joining live on the call, and then those who will listen to the call recording later. They're registering from all over the world, which is very, very exciting, and looking forward to having you go through this seminar with me and then share with you how to start taking power over your career. So a couple things before we get started. For those of you that video in, if you do not want to be on the video, please make sure to mute your video screen, turn off your video. And I'll try to keep things live. If you do hear a lot of noise, I'll just ask to mute, or I'll universally mute you. If you've got questions along the way, feel free to take yourself off the mute, interrupt anytime. We want to make sure that all the concepts are easily accessible and that you actually get them as I'm going through them. You can chat me as well. I've got the chat live up. And along the way, I'll be peppering in some key marketing terms. I'm a chief marketing officer in New York, and I really feel that the brand that you're trying to create really is you. So I want to make sure that you're taking those different terms that can be really helpful in whether you are in a current job, looking for another job, whatever it's going to help you take power over your career, and give you all the benefit of the expertise that I've been able to learn in my career to actually create that brand you. Because no matter if you're an entrepreneur or you are in corporate America, you're every day you are your brand and are presenting yourself. So for those that are new to the format, because there's quite a few people that are new, definitely shout out to the Thunderbirds that are joining. I'm very excited to have you on the call. By the way, Thunderbird was my graduate school that I went to, had reunion. I'm not going to say what year it was, a couple weeks ago, and there's a big contingency joining there. So thank you, big shout out. But for those that are new to the call, it'll be about an hour, maybe less. And what I'll do is I'll go through who my credentials are. The topic of today's Career Boost call is going to be the biggest mistake keeping you from career success. And I got a lot of interesting emails like, what could it be? So hopefully I will not disappoint you, but it will actually really help you because it's helped me tremendously in a lot of different scenarios that could be keeping you from that career success that you're looking for. I've suffered from it. My clients suffered from it. So I've got a couple of case studies that I'll share in this call to give you examples of what could be impacting you and then how to overcome it. So I'll also be leaving a open Q&A at the back end. You can ask about the topic. You can ask about anything you want. No holds bar. You'll be getting free coaching advice. And lastly, just to let you know that anyone that does join the call is eligible for a free discovery session with me. That's usually worth $250. But you just let me know that you're on the Career Boost call. You can reach me at info@loamlife.com. We'll get you signed up, and you can get some free direct one-to-one coaching if you do not ask any questions on this call specifically. So before I get started, I just want to check in and see if anyone has any questions. We're getting more people joining live, so I'll pause right there. Anybody got any questions? All right, so silence I'll take as a go ahead. So first of all, I'm going to start with my point of difference. And point of difference is definitely a marketing term that I've shared previously on other calls. Your point of difference is really important to you. And it's something that I work with all my clients on. And what it is a unique set of skills, hard skills and soft skills, in a way that you position yourself to others that set you apart from your competitive set. And for your competitive set, if you're in a corporation or you're actually an entrepreneur, your competitive set is who else you're competing against for either a client and or business. But in day-to-day, and it's happening a lot, and you may be aware of it, you've got your own daily competitive set. The person that is lateral to you, the person that the entrepreneur or the intrapreneur, they actually call them when they come into business, and they try to change things, could be competing with you. If you feel competition, and actually you always are kind of feeling it, it could be for a different department. It could be someone who is competing with you for the space with your boss, with your business, etc. And it's important to have a really good understanding of what your point of difference, or sometimes what they call a POD, is to make sure that you are setting yourself apart and standing out. Because really today, with how jobs, yes, they supposedly the jobs have increased in the US, but it's becoming more fierce. It's becoming more competitive. We're losing a lot of traditional, even white collars now getting hit so hard. I know some of my own friends and clients are getting hit in different things from, I'm in an agency background. It's getting dramatically changed. Retail is getting dramatically changed. So it's really important to figure out how you stand out and those key attributes, those hard skills, those soft skills, and then how you position yourself to be unique is what's going to make you stand out. So for me, my point of difference is, again, my name, by the way, is Victoria Repke-Geller. I'm a chief marketing officer at a digital agency in Manhattan, in actually Gramercy. I have been doing marketing and advertising for over 18 years. So what I bring to my coaching practice actually is real work-life experience. A lot of coaches will end up going into the business. I have my certification from NYU, which is recognized by the International Coaching Federation, and I'm specifically trained to be an international career transformation strategist. So while I focus in the career, a lot of people ask this distinction. It is still personal coaching. There is life coaching in it because our careers, they've become so blurred with our professional lives that you really, my way through is a career, but we touch on everything when you work with me. So I bring an educated perspective to my coaching and have a background in neuroscience and behavioral science to really help, again, you take that power over your career so you don't feel like it's managing you, but you're managing it. I've worked with hundreds of clients, and I've worked with them in Germany, Hong Kong, Australia, the UK, US. Actually, lately, and I'm not kidding, I've been working with a lot of Russians. I don't know why that seems to be topical, but when I tend to work with one area, they introduce me to other people, and that seems to be the latest region that I've been finding clients in. And yes, for me personally, when I'm working with clients, most of it is done via phone, and it can be any time zone. I really work around like your schedule. But my mission, which I'd like to share with you, is when I'm coaching, I make it all about you. And my commitment really is to like help executives, entrepreneurs, and young professionals find, navigate, and succeed in their career paths. And those career paths can take lots of different twists and turns. Like I know personally, I've been at one job where I've had 3 bosses in a year. And so you're constantly pivoting, trying to figure out how you figure that dynamic. So big boss changes. It could be changes in your work title. It could be changes in what you, your list of duties that make you have to like kind of pivot. So what I do is help them strategize. And my real goal is really making work more rewarding, enjoyable, and profitable. Because we do really work hard. There's not anyone, I tend to attract, this kind of client who's A-type, a little bit like me, puts a lot into their work. But I want to make sure that the work you're putting in is rewarding and you're actually benefiting and profiting from it. Because I really do feel like you should always know what you're worth and never settle for less. And the best way to be able to do that is actually to get people on board with you on that track. So I also will be talking about in here about this key thing that this number one mistake that you could be making. It's really important that you understand that if you address this, you could actually get people on board and help you get where you want to go, which is a very exciting proposition because it makes it easier and it's not up to you to move that ship. So the content for the call, as I just mentioned, is going to be the number one biggest mistake keeping you from career success. In my last call, I would just share that, and you can find this on YouTube or a link can be sent to you, but I talked about the 3 keys to career success, which are clarity, commitment, and conviction. Now, those are very much internally focused. You have to be clear, and I went through tools on that. You have to be committed, and you have to have the conviction, that mindset of you're going to move yourself forward. But I'm telling you, you won't get anywhere unless you really know this one thing that could be holding you back. And it is a big struggle, especially with my clients who are stepping into management positions, leadership positions. And my assumption through all of this is going to be that all of you want to progress in your career, that at some point you're managing somebody, you're going to be on your way to managing someone, and you need someone to help you also with your career path. So this is why I'm assuming you're on the call to really figure out what that is and get that help. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go in really on the content. So I'll pause for 1 second and make sure there isn't. All right, silence is golden. Again, there's a chat functionality. If you want to ask a question, you can take yourself off pause. Feel free to interrupt. I get very excited about this content. I'm also very loquacious by nature, so feel free to interrupt. I won't take it personally, and we'll go from there. So my key question, and this is another important thing, because a lot of us come in with the answers, but I think we should start with the questions. And the first question that I would ask, and probably rhetorically, is what is the one universal truth that we all share in life, especially in our careers? Men, women, that one universal truth that everyone really understands. And I'll actually pause for a second and see if anyone has any answers. Do you have any answers on what that one universal truth is? I think you guys are going to be shy. All right, I'll keep going. The truth is, one of these truths is we all love to talk and hear ourselves talk. And it's important to set that up, not because we have big egos, but in our careers, because we are positioning ourselves, we really do want to get across like who we are and know that we have a point of view, or a POV, that's called a lot of times. And then like that we can stand out amongst our competitive set, our peers. And sometimes we just like to hear the sound of our own voice. So we do love to talk about ourselves, but what research shows is that we really have a problem in listening. We're very bad at absorbing all the content. We're inundated day in day with information. We're having conversations. And what research shows is that we only retain about 25% of what is said. And that can be very detrimental in regards to really hearing what someone is saying to you to get ahead with what you want to accomplish in your career. So while I do think there's a big universal truth, and now I'm going to get to the one mistake we're making, which is that we all love to talk and hear ourselves talk. And I know there's someone on the call that actually probably hates hearing themselves talk, but I'm not going to call her out. But the biggest universal truth, which I do think is very universal, is that the truth is we all want to be heard. David Rock said that in our careers, what we want is called a SCARF. And this is really a good acronym for my managers and my leaders. And you probably feel it too. When you come into your job, you want to have status, you want certainty in your job, you want autonomy. I hear that a lot with my clients, like very frustrated that they don't have the autonomy that they want in their jobs. You want relatedness. You want to like have teams, speak with some people, and like relate to not only your job, but to the people around you. You want to be in a good environment. And lastly, you want fairness. But I think what's most important on top of all of that is that you want to be heard, because you're not going to get, if you're not being heard or you don't have a place to go to speak to someone, you might not be able to attain the status that you want. You won't know the certainty because you don't have a forum to actually ask about it. You might not be able to ask for the autonomy you want. You might not be able to voice that like things are unfair, and that you might also be missing an opportunity to relate with like other departments, etc. So I think it's really important. That's the number one thing is that mistake that we're making is that we're not listening, that we're not being heard, or we're not hearing other people. So I'm going to go from both sides of it, in that like this act, this universal, like I want to be heard. If you're not being heard, it's going to lead frustration. And if you're managing and leading and you're not listening to those around you, it could actually derail your career extremely. And I'll give a couple of examples, one in a positive way of how this worked, and one in a way that actually did derail someone's career and how they turned it around. So this one mistake that you could be making is not listening, and how I'm going to really help you get a tool to combat this is through active listening. So remember, we're only hearing about 25% of what is said. So I'm saying a lot of words, you're only taking a few of it, but if you remember that, like it's through active listening is what we're going to be going through. So did someone have a question? Okay. Now, you're probably thinking, but I'm a good listener. Some of you may think that you're really hearing people when they're talking to you, but again, like I said, only 25% of what is heard. So what I'm here to tell you is you're not. I don't care who you are. I'm a coach. And we all get distracted sometimes when we're talking to people. I very much make sure that I've taken a lot of like this active listening training so that I can really hone in, but we get distracted. We get in our own head. We're thinking about, what I'm going to say, how am I going to respond? So especially if we're getting critiqued, it's only human to like get distracted and not really focus in, especially if you're getting feedback from a boss or a peer. it's also human nature to avoid conflict. When we need a forum to be able to have that active listening, to have someone hear us or have someone tell us what they need to tell us, it's just easier to like not provide that opportunity. And it festers and it derails careers. And that's an example I'm going to give later. Also, the biggest mistake, and this is something I think is really, really important, and I've seen it really impact all my clients, is that we think others think like us. It's obviously on the political scope, we can see it, but we walk into scenarios, we think, one, that we know how someone's going to react, or we think they think like us, and we don't over-explain and listen to the nuances, the tone, the body language, what they're actually saying to address it. We come with a huge bias. So what I'm hearing to say is like, you really aren't actively listening, but we're going to give you some tools too. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. And it can be surprisingly easy. And the first and the most important thing, so if you don't take anything else away, like you don't even have to take 25% of this. The only thing you need to take away is that you just need to shut up. And I'm going to punctuate that. I'm trying to be a little humorous with it too, but it's true. You just need to shut up. Let someone talk. And it can be really hard. The example I'll give with you a little bit later is the person, one of the men that I work with, he just didn't want to listen to these people. And he would interrupt, he'd cancel the conversations, or he'd move on. Or he would start to, I like explain, I know mansplaining, all that. I don't want to say that's all about all men, because all people can end up doing that. But like he would just really cut the conversation short. And the biggest thing you can do is just shut up, give someone a forum, because that's what you would want. But seriously, for any conversation, whether you're looking to give feedback or get feedback, you need to set the stage. So I'm going to walk you through how it is done, and then I'll give some examples of how it can actually benefit you. So, but before I do, are there any questions? All right. So here's how it's done. First, you need to set the stage. And there's a couple ways that you do this. So if you are trying to have a conversation with someone else, or you are having someone have a conversation with you, you need to let them know what the conversation is about, what the topic is about. You want to let them know you're checking in. You want to give context to it, because people coming into like a scenario where they don't have a lot of information, they can get like cold feet and not really share. And what you're trying to do is invite conversation and really get a chance to listen so you can address things. Try to do it in person, because body language is really key. And sometimes what they're saying doesn't align with how they're actually feeling. So I'm sure you've been in meetings where everyone's like, everything's great, but they're like holding back, slouched over. So if you can do it in person, it's great. But via phone, what you really need to be, if you're on it, you listen to hesitations, you listen to tones, and you have to ask a lot of questions. And there can be like even a conversation of like, I sense there's something wrong. You may not be telling me, asking those questions, opening up the ability for them to really be honest, any kind of, and for you as well, for you to be honest, but setting the tone of like, either I need to share something and making them understand what's going on, or you're opening up the forum, especially if you're a manager or leader, to let them tell you. Pick your topic and start with some questions. So I said, like, it's always important to start with some key questions, and some good ones for you to start with are like, what do you feel is working? Or here's what I want to share is working. How could I help you succeed? Or here's how you could help me succeed. It's great wording, by the way, of how can I help you succeed if you're a manager or a leader, because it shows that you're interested in their success and you want to help. It also puts you on a level playing field. And that's what happens a lot when people don't feel that they can speak, and they won't tell you what's going on. If you're trying to invite active listening, you really need to make the playing field equitable. Like, you're going to be transparent, you're expecting authenticity, you'll be authentic as well, and you're really invested in hearing what they have to say. Some other key questions, like what do you feel is working, inviting them to tell you and showing that you're going to listen about what is not working. That's a kind of vulnerable spot for a lot of people to be in, but I've had the most fruitful conversations asking what was not working, and some of the fear that I thought wasn't it was something else that we could address. There's another key question could be, is there one thing you thought I should know to help improve things? What would it be? So most of these things are really to like really open up the dialogue and getting them. And I would always ask positive and also, what consider negative questions, like what's working, what's not working, and then let them speak. Hi, baby. I don't know what baby that is, but hello. Another one, just my last one that I'll share, is like, how can I improve things for you, your team, and the company? Are always ways of, like, if you're talking to someone who's reporting into you, how can I improve that? And I'm going to put on mute.
You muted yourself.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Hello. If you could, whoever put on mute, and thank you for the heads up. So we'll go back to, thank you. Giving, how can I improve things for your team, you, the team, and the company? So if you're talking to someone who's reporting into you, you could tell them that, like, you want to ask how you can help them improve their lot. If you're talking to your superior, you could ask them, like, what can I do better for the team and the company? But it opens up a really fruitful dialogue. And always give them permission in these conversations to be honest. And be honest as well as back. The next step is really paying attention. Give the speaker your undivided attention. No phones. Make sure that you've got it blocked off. And make sure there's just no interruptions, so that you show respect, because you want the same thing back. And if you're going to be talking with your supervisor, tell them that, like, you really want an undeterred time. You can't always control what their schedules are, but try to find the best opportunity to get on their schedule, to have something that's not interrupted, so that you get that focus well. Show that you're listening. Use your own body language. Face them. And use gestures to convey that you are paying attention. Again, as I said, make sure that you are quiet, and keep asking them. And this is the key thing for making sure that you are keeping that active listening going, is to show them that you're interested, and keep saying, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. And I'm going to give you an example of this in a few seconds, of, like, how you can actually show and move that conversation on, and demonstrate that you're actively listening. But that's a key phrase. That's interesting. Even if you don't think it's interesting, even if you do not agree, it's a really great conversation to keep the conversation going, of, like, that's interesting. You give them acknowledgement, and tell me more. And you keep asking them to tell you more until they have nothing else to say. It validates you, and it validates them. In the end, with anything else, also, there's an opportunity to really show some vulnerability. Some people aren't comfortable with this. I am actually a very big proponent of it, of like, letting them know that, like, you are going to be very open and authentic and transparent. And, like, I call it going belly up, but, like, showing some sort of vulnerability. Like, I've gotten this feedback before that I'm going to talk to you about. Or, I feel like I'm struggling a bit. People like to help. They do like to help. And then you ask, to, like, really be heard. In the end, you always repeat. This is really important. So I advise you, whether you are leading the conversation and actively listening, or you're asking someone else to be taking notes and summarize what you heard. This is what I heard you say to me. This is what, and this is the action that we're going to take. Because there's no other better way to let someone know that you have been actively listening than to repeat what they said. Again, people, my first universal word, they love to hear themselves speak. They also love to hear their own words spoken back to them. So the more that you can grab those words, write them down, and always ask permission. Like, I'm going to take notes. Is that okay? Most people will say yes. And then you have a documentation also moving forward. And then some other key, in addition, solutions that you can add to, like, really show people that you are an active listener, someone they can come to, they can, like, work with on solutions, is always give ongoing feedback. It shouldn't just be like a one and done thing. And I'm not just talking about evaluations. I'm talking about just checking in with your boss, anyone that reports into you, on an ongoing basis. And if you have feedback for them that can help them, and I ask this of my bosses too, so it goes both ways. If you see something that I'm doing that you don't want me to do anymore, tell me now. The last thing I want to do is find out 6 months from now that I've been doing something that's been driving you crazy. Or if there's something that you think I do great, I want to hear immediately. Same thing they can be doing for them. That you have an open door policy to bring ideas and complaints in. And honestly, if your culture isn't conducive to this, there's a great way to just do a survey monkey, where you can do anonymous questions similar to the ones that I mentioned before, and these will all be in the recording, that you can ask, that give your employees an opportunity to really share what's on their mind. So that is like the setup of like how you do active listening. You set the stage, try to do it in person. You pick your topic and make sure everyone's aware of what the topic is. You pay attention to what is being said. You show that you're listening through body language, questions, and listening. You actively ask over and over again, that's interesting, tell me more. And do that over and over again until they have nothing else to share. It's not to make them exhausted, just make sure that they, in the beginning, people be hesitant to share what they're really thinking, and you want to like open up that conversation. And lastly, you want to make sure that you repeat what you heard in it, document it in writing, especially if it happens to be an evaluation. You never know when that can come in check. And that we can do on an ongoing basis is make sure that you are always giving ongoing feedback, opening up the conversation, because you never know where ideas can come from. And if you're closing conversation down, you might miss the benefit of working with your team and really getting the benefit of what they're saying. Communicating that you have an open door policy. And again, like I said, there could be an anonymous survey. So are there any questions on what I've shared so far? I'll go into some case studies that'll bring it more to life. All right. So then what I'm going to go into now are some case studies. And if I could just ask whoever has the baby in the background, if they can mute themselves. I don't, for some reason, have the access to universal mute, and I don't want to cut everybody off. Thank you. All right. So here are some examples of how active listening could really help. Because I think there's one key thing that could be happening if you're not doing active listening, that you could be leaving money on the table. It can also help you on the flip side negotiate. So I'm going to share a personal story to bring that to example. A couple years ago, I was interviewing at a company. I was negotiating my salary, my package, and my benefits, etc. And it was an independent company, and I wanted equity in the company. And they had said that they would never do that. And I first took that at face value. But for some reason, it was something that I really wanted to pursue more, but I couldn't get around it. I could not figure out why they specifically didn't want to give equity in the company, because they'd done it previously. So I met with the CEO of the company. I sat down with him. And I asked him, well, we're negotiating my contract. I'd asked for equity in the company, and you had said no. And I'd really like to know more about that. And he's like, we just don't do it. I'm like, well, tell me more about that. That's interesting, because a lot of companies, especially with hiring someone at my level, would definitely be looking at ensuring that there's some sort of equity, and especially at a private agency. And he's like, well, we just don't do it. And I kept asking over and over, well, tell me more. Why won't you do that? And then what he got into was a story of about 4 years previous to when I started. They had hired someone, not in my position, but a similar level. They had given them equity, and it didn't work out. But I didn't just stop there with him telling me that story, because some people would be like, oh, well, he said they're never going to do it. They got burned. I asked him even more questions well, that's really interesting. Tell me what you would be open to. Is it a time frame? Because it sounded like, you had just mentioned they'd only been there about a year, and it seemed like a lot to give up part of your company. Would there be a time frame that you would be open to? And as I started asking more about based on what I heard, was that the time frame was too short. They'd given up some of the part of their company. And they'd given a substantial chunk. What we ended up negotiating was that I had to be there 2 years, and it would be on a vested level. And we put a lot of parameters in. But I went from a negotiation where they weren't going to give me any equity in the company to listening to what he had to say, using that active listening, that over and over again of I'm here to talk about this. Tell me more about why you're resistant to this. And it actually put more money on the table. And it showed them, and he said this later, because we talked about it after I started working there. He's like, it showed me that if you would negotiate for yourself and you could listen and you brought me around. I would never have, was not going to entertain it. I could definitely tell that he was not going to entertain it. But I broke him down. not in a bad way, but like I listened to what his concerns were, what his worries were, and then used them in a way to get what I wanted. And I think that's part of, and I know it's about negotiation, but that's negotiation, that listening and getting people to do what you want is actually the definition of leadership. How do you get people to do what you want and make it think that it's their idea? Now, I know that sounds really manipulative, but in the end, like, he was okay giving me equity. I was going to earn it, and it was on his terms. It just opened up the conversation for us to be able to negotiate something that was fair and equitable to both of us. And that was really important to me. And I did that all through just active listening. I barely spoke. I listened to him over and again, kept asking, is there anything more? Is there anything more? And then I repeated back what I heard. And then I was able to position it to get what I wanted in the situation. And we both felt good about it. And that is definitely a win-win, which you're always hoping for any kind of negotiation. So that's one example of how you can use active listening. That tool really just comes down to like, this is what I want to talk about. And setting the stage, of course, if it's for somebody else, which I'll give the next example of where it's not about you personally, trying to get someone to move in the direction you want. And I want to keep asking questions to what the resistance is. Or if there's been positives, you keep questioning on that until you get to the heart of the matter, and you can use that information to move forward your steps. And it helps in negotiation, it helps in sales too. So any questions on that first example? All right. So, and it's not only just worked for me, by the way, it's definitely worked with other clients who have gone into negotiations where they've been lowballed, and then we've been able to strategize. I'll give you one more quick example. It turned out one of my clients just got a new job. She was lowballed, which tends to be a lot that happens, unfortunately. And we went in, and I gave her a whole bunch of key questions to ask them. And one of them, it turned out the reason they had lowballed her, that she felt, was because at her level, they hadn't ever given anyone a higher salary than that. So what she ended up negotiating and talking to them about, and I said questions over and over again, well, why is this? Because at my level and what I see at other companies is X. She's able to negotiate and make them come on board with giving her a 6-month check-in if she hit certain metrics, and she could get that bump, which she felt good about. She didn't get in the very beginning, but she definitely got it for herself down the road. And again, that was all based on listening to what their issues were, which is like, well, we never brought anyone at that level. It wouldn't seem fair, to finding a halfway point that worked for both of them. And she still felt actually her starting salary is okay. So that was going to be at least 6 months getting in there, and is very happy at her current role. So now the other area beyond helping you negotiate or not leave money on the table is if you're not actively listening, and this is a case study, an example for my managers and leaders, it can derail, or worse, it can keep you from being promoted, or better yet, if you want to put on the positive side, it can help you get promoted. So I'm very much in the belief of because you can't change a situation if you don't know there's an issue. And one of my clients, a male client that I work with, he was set up for success from the CEO. He was supposed to be taking over his department because the SVP above him had been moved out. And when it came down to all these promises of taking over this role, all of a sudden they were opening it up to other applicants. And they just explained that it made sense to do that, looking at external and internal applicants for this role. They went through a very formal process. And for this role that he was purposely groomed for, but he didn't want to ask any questions. He was like, well, I'll just go through it. Part of it, I think, definitely knew that he thought he was just going to get it, and it was just a check mark. But my senses were like they don't open up that kind of thing. It's takes a lot of time and investment. So something was kind of off. Anyway, they went through a formal process, and turns out he was passed over for it. But they didn't give him a lot of feedback on why. And he'd been at the company for about 10 years. So it was been coming up all through the ranks, and very excited about that, and thought this was going to be the next, jewel in his crown. So we sat and strategized, and I had him go back and ask some deeper questions and say just very specifically that it had upset him to have been passed over. And he really wanted the frank feedback of why it was the case. And what came out of it, which was fascinating, was that they felt that it wasn't anyone lateral to him or above him that derailed it, but it was his staff below him that said he wasn't empathetic enough, wasn't listening to them, and didn't think he would be good at running the entire department based on their interactions with them. And that's changed a lot in corporate America. A lot of these scenarios and situations, there's a very vocal, I'm sure I've got millennials on the call, and I love you for it. Like, you're changing corporate America a lot, but like very vocal, and will complain. Whereas before that didn't happen a lot. So what they said, that they actually said his staff could not stand him. They didn't think he was a very nice person, which destroyed him, because he when I was coaching with him, I could tell he's very friendly, but he must have a different personality when he went to work. Anyway, when we had our session after getting that feedback, he said, I always really prided myself on being so available. And what I was told was I was cold and I wasn't listening. So when I asked him more questions and started realizing a couple of things that came out that he didn't even hear for himself. So active listening is not just even just with other people, but listening and having someone repeat back to you what you're hearing. That's why it's really great to work with a coach, because we don't know our own blind spots. And a couple of things that we realized: one, he wasn't having regular check-ins with his team. It was very ad hoc. He didn't give positive feedback. It wasn't because he didn't see positive things. He was only focused on helping them improve. And he thought that was actually benefiting them from them. But the sensitivity of it, how he's presenting it, kind of was obviously off-putting for his team. He kept his communication, this tends to be with a lot of people, very short, clipped, like we got a lot of work to do. Never asked anything personally about the people that worked with him. I know some people, you don't have to go into huge personal stories, but they wanted to like have a little bit more of a connection with them, and never asked them about their lives, their weekends, like was just very much very business oriented. If his team came to him, he would always have something else that needed to get done. So he would only book 15 minutes. He would rush them through their conversations. I actually had him taking me through of some of the conversation he did. And it's like after 5 minutes, he was already checking out. And what he missed in that was really that people were having problems with him. And they had actually, he said in hindsight, he knows that a couple people tried to say I need more time with you. I could use some, positive input, but he in his own mindset didn't feel that was really relevant to the conversation. So it was kind of funny, because in our conversation, he was like, oh my God, I think I'm a dick. And I shared with him, personally, I don't think you really are, but it does sound like you aren't displaying some of the empathy and the EQ. Another big term that's coming through with mindset work into the workforce is EQ. IQ is always important, but EQ is becoming even more important. How do you relate to people? A lot of the evaluations you're probably getting or giving other people have a lot of that kind of, how are you relating? How is your team building? More of the softer skills are becoming even more important. So what we did is we strategized, and I really believe this. So that's another thing to take away from this call. There is nothing, and I personally can attest to it, that can happen in your day, in your career, in your work, that you can't turn around. I was like, I know this is personally frustrating for you, but if you really work on this with me, and I'm going to give you some tools to go in with, you will turn this around. It may take a bit, but they obviously highly find you highly valuable. So let's work on this together. So we sat down, we put together a list of questions, some of the ones I've already previously shared. And I'm like, you're going to have to go in and share with them, I've gotten this feedback. I really want to work at it. You can't just say it, you have to show it. And I'm going to be adding, I want to get your true feedback. And it's probably going to take 3 or 4 sessions for people to truly trust you. And you're going to have to ask over and over again. Because I told him what the worst thing is, if you're not opening up this conversation, there's a lot of great ideas that can come from down below, etc. But as I just shared, it derailed his promotion, the thing that he was working for the most. So he actually has started the process. He's already gotten some very positive feedback from his the person above him, that not the person that took the role that he wanted, but the person that was conducting all the interviewing, saying like she could definitely see. So the president of the division said, I could definitely see that you're trying to work on this. People felt like, oh, that kind of that telling you that belly up, like he came in like, I made a mistake. I didn't mean it. I thought these were just behaviors that, and I didn't get any feedback. So I want to open up a conversation. And he would let them sometimes just come in and vent. He would set up a time once a month where people could, and if they wanted to come on the fly, they could, at least once a month where they could just come in and vent. So again, like I was saying, like it's never too late to surmount. And actually they're talking about different roles within the company that he can move to, not because his career is off track, but like, okay, we can see that you're really trying this and we want to make sure that you're staying here. So while his dream of having this department might not be the case, something else might open up from it. And it's going to help him regardless, because I'll tell you something, if you're doing it in one company and it could derail you like that, if you leave the job, which was something he was like thinking about doing, you will end up going into another one and making the same mistake, which at one point, like hopefully you just decide like, I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's very important to really open up and give that opportunity to let people give you feedback. So that was the example of like how working with as a manager or a leader with others, to make sure that you're having that connection with them and getting that information, because personally it could be derailing your career. And also it's just a really great management technique, because if you open up those questions like what is working, what's not, how can I help you succeed, you might find something that's like detrimental to your team, detrimental to you, detrimental to the company, that you can course correct before it becomes too late. And it's also a great way with clients too, this active listening, having those conversations with them as comfortable they are. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Now we can improve on an ongoing basis so that you're not blindsided down the road, and it helps along the way. So that is the two examples. The last thing I'll just say is you can active listen with yourself. I tend to do, instead of a written journal, I do a verbal journal, and I'll just like ask myself, tell me more if I need to come to consensus on something in my own mind that I'm debating back and forth. So that's my last little thing on active listening and how it works. But it's not that hard. It helped me gain more money in a salary negotiation. It's helped it can help you maybe potentially avoid derailing your career. And it's the one and most important thing that you could be doing in your career, is making sure that you're setting up time either with people that work with you, beside you or below you, and above you, to make sure that you are getting the information you need to succeed. So, are there any questions on anything I've shared so far? All right. Well, then this gets to my favorite part of the call, which is open Q&A. It can be on what I just spoke about if you want any clarity, or you're in a similar situation, or it can be on something completely different. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have of me.
Hey, Victoria, this is Deborah Patterson. How are you?
Oh, hey, Deborah, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I'm in kind of a new role, and when you were talking about the struggles with kind of a boss or manager who communicates in a style that kind of feels different from yours, and I've been thinking about approaching this boss to ask about a tuition reimbursement program that my employer offers.
Great.
But I don't know how to go about it in a way that I'm just not really sure how to approach the conversation because I feel like I get a lot of negative feedback from him. And so I don't want to get turned down, but I also don't want to miss the opportunity with this employer.
So your hesitation, the negative feedback that you get from it, has it had anything to do with corporate policies or more performance?
No, it's more performance-based. It just, he just seems, in my eyes, kind of passive-aggressive, not very, you could be doing, all right, my perception is I could be doing one area really well, but then the focus always goes back to what's not going well.
Yeah. And this
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. This perk, I just want to kind of separate it out. Like this perk that you're looking for, the tuition reimbursement, is that available to all employees?
It is. The one caveat is that it has to be something related to this particular genre of business. And I believe that my program does. That said, it's a little bit subjective interpretation, and he's the ultimate one to approve it or deny it.
Okay. So is it less about whether he's subjective or like how the positioning of, this particular reimbursement you're looking for, meaning making the correlation of, because it sounds like they have this policy. Do you have to be there a certain amount of time to actually take advantage of that?
That I don't know. I've just started talking to another manager or boss about it,
Okay.
But he didn't really have clarity about it. So that's a possibility. I think that it might be more that you have to also, if it's given, you have to continue to be there a certain amount of time, but I'm not clear on some of those details.
Yeah. So two things. One, I would definitely find out what the details of the policy are. So try to check with a couple other people, or even like try to check with the HR. And because that will help, because you don't want to go in and like ask for it, and it's not feasible right now. And that'll take a whole bunch of like, not red herrings, but distractions away from the conversation, because you won't get into that. Two, what I'm hearing is like, you definitely have a perception, and it does sound like he can be, and he might be a toxic person, I'm not sure. But if you have on your side, like, look, I've been here in the amount of time, but it's going to be positioning to him to make it an easy slam dunk of like, this particular thing that I want tuition reimbursement for helps me. And this company, doesn't help me, it helps the company this way. So can I ask you what the class is, or whatever you're looking to get reimbursed for?
Yes, so I'm working on a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of, and so the business that I'm in, or the particular type of field I'm in right now is like this, he's actually working on an MBA.
Okay.
And so there's some relatability there. And there is a lot of content in it that's just psychology. But there's also a lot of like leadership, organizational climate, things that I feel like are directly relatable to what I'm doing right now.
Great. And this day job that this job that you're in, what, like in like a few words, like in sales, what is the focus?
Like telecom, sales.
All right.
Retail.
So, yeah, it sounds like you've got a couple of things you can pull apart. One is making sure that you aren't clouding that, like, yeah, he can be negative, and don't let that stop you. Two is you just shared a couple of things, which listen back to the recording of like, you could already see that this class that I'm taking can help me in my persuasion, get to the psychology of like how someone might buy. There's definitely ways that you can position it, which is true. Like, as you learn more about people, sales is all about like selling to someone, understanding what their need is, and then positioning it to them for that need. So the three things you need to do: one is find out about the policy is actually relevant to you. Two is put aside like whatever negativity you can have about it, because it's good to have the conversation regardless, and or if there's an opportunity to go above or around him to get permission on it. But it sounds like he's the one that you have to talk to, right?
That's my understanding right now. There is like a perfunctory thing you have to submit, on just like the corporate end. But it's my understanding once that has been submitted, he has to actually like sign off on it.
Yeah. So we want to make it his idea. Like, a couple of the inroads is like, I know you're getting your MBA. I know it's like looking for business. I too am trying to prove myself. I really think that this helps sales. And I'm sure there's tons of information you can Google on it too, of like, how does psychology help with sales, et cetera. That can help support your argument. And there shouldn't be any reason, if you're eligible and you can support the argument, that he should at least entertain it. And that could be like, I would definitely like craft something. And if you want to send me an example of that to info@loanlife.com, I can give you a couple thoughts on it as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did that help?
It does.
Good. Yay. All right. Anyone else have any questions? We've got time.
Hey, Victoria, this is Yvette. I have several questions, but I'll
Okay.
just ask one of them.
Don't be greedy. You can have them all.
So you were talking about marketing yourself and to your company or outside your company.
Mhm.
And for somebody who is not very open about achievements, and how do you go about doing this? And let me give you a specific example.
Sure.
So I just won an award.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. For Volunteer of the Year in my company.
Okay.
So it was basically, within the U.S. and Canada, they pick 6 winners to win an award for being a volunteer of the year. And then of the 6, I was, I guess, the Uber Volunteer of the Year. And you get grant money to donate to your charity of choice.
Oh, wow. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you. So, it's all over internally, my company internally, but how do I market it to just kind of broadcast it to my outside network without appearing to be, I don't know, bragging about it? Like, I would much rather have somebody say, "Hey, congratulations, Yvette. Look what happened to her," rather than me saying, "Hey, look what I just did." And I don't know how to. I guess I'm not very good at marketing myself with my achievements without appearing to be bragging about it. Like, I feel like there's a very fine line.
Okay. Is there a reason why you're looking to make sure others know about it? I mean, I think it's a great thing. So is there like something specific you want, like a certain person or group, where you just want to kind of share?
So it's about being Volunteer of the Year, and so I want to be able to let people know so that I can let them know about the nonprofit work that I'm involved with.
All right.
So it's not for me to advance myself personally as much as it is to kind of advertise the nonprofit that I'm working with.
Got it. So,
and to basically solicit funding.
Sure. So a couple things. One is, and you kind of provided one solution, you could look to have a friend brag for you, which is like, could be easily done and crafted. But I think your way in for this, and it's focusing in on the fact that I'm doing this because it's actually going to help this organization, and trying to put aside your uncomfortableness about bragging about yourself, but like, it is for the betterment of this organization. I worked really hard. I've been recognized for this. So maybe it becomes like, I've been working with this organization. In fact, I just got recognized internally for how I've been the Volunteer of the Year to really move this cause forward. A little bit less about, it's probably the only time I'll ever recommend to someone, like, not because I think bragging is actually really important, but you're really focused on the benefit of this organization while you still get a nod to yourself. Like, I'm so excited. I just got this nod for all this work that I've done with this organization internally. It's a great organization. Here's about it. Here's a link. Would love to have more than just my company benefiting this organization, and then spreading it out through your social networks, through maybe an email chain, and and asking your friends, like tagging your friends. It could be on LinkedIn. I don't know what social platforms you are on, but if you kind of put yourself in the mindset of like, I'm doing this for this organization versus for myself, but still give an opportunity to say like, I did this at my company, now I want to spread it to everyone else because I so believe in this organization. That would probably be the way in. And then I'd want to work with you separately to help you brag more about yourself.
Okay.
But that's a great, and that's a good way in first, and actually can get you a little bit more comfortable with bragging for yourself. Like if you can let the organization be first, and then I did this and I accomplished this, it might be a soft foot into finally owning the badass that I'm sure you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good approach.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
And I do see there's a question for in the chat. Thank you. Do you have any examples of how active listening would help me when working with potential clients? In the group chat in my house. Oh, yes. So examples of how to actively listen with when you're potentially working with potential clients. Absolutely. So, because I have to do this all the time, and there's actually a great book, by the way, called Just Listen. And if you're working with clients, it's actually geared more a little bit toward coaches, but it helps tremendously with anyone who has to work with clients to bring them in. But one thing I've learned in my career is clients, especially because they're going to pay you, they want to know you're going to listen to them and help them achieve what they want to accomplish. So I don't know, Ladin, if you have something specific, or I can be a little generic if you want to give me more details on like, have you had an issue working with clients where they maybe felt you weren't listening, or this is just in general, like when I'm working with clients, how do I active listen? I'll keep going the general route. And if you, general, okay. When working with clients, yes. So for example, I work with clients all day long, not only in my coaching business, but also in my advertising practice. Clients come to you with a problem they want to know that you can solve. And for example, some of the questions on this call, they want to know that, I'm just picking this out, but like, your client comes to you, I need to be able, I'm just going to pick this, like I need to schedule an event in Arizona. But I'm not really sure how to go about it. My challenge is making sure that I fill seats with people that are a certain income bracket, et cetera. They've now given you all this, the challenge that they're having, like they're not attracting the right people to this event to donate. I'm making this scenario up, but they really can't get the right people in the seats. So one thing for you would be to ask, like, if you've had this challenge, what do you think is leading to this challenge? Why is it important to find this kind of demographic? It could be actually it's just not the right demographic for the cause that they're looking at. And I know I'm making all these details up, but hopefully it's representative, an example of like, you're trying to host something, like, as I said, I just picked an event in Arizona. Oh, great. Good. Thank you for letting me know this is working in the right direction. So keep going in this. But I'm working this. I want to understand what your challenge is. Always start with like, what challenge are you facing? What are you trying to accomplish? What's worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked for you in the past? Why is it that you think that you aren't reaching who you need to reach? You might even want to ask actually for them if they can provide you, and it's a little bit off of the active listening part of it, but as it pops in my mind, if they're having, you can talk to former clients of theirs or people that they've done, people that have participated in their events, what was good, what wasn't good, maybe in a little bit of a survey, but specifically, you want to create a dialogue with this company to understand truly what their challenge is, what their objective is, what their goals are, their KPIs, and then ask them questions to see what's worked before and what hasn't worked. And ask those questions again, like to really get at it, because sometimes people, they don't really know. And if you could, as I mentioned, talk to someone who has been at an event or not, might give you some insight as well. But you want to keep asking them, like, if they are struggling giving you the information that you want, sometimes phone interview, letting people just talk is a good way. You might want to start with a form, but getting them on the phone is also very helpful to, again, asking them over and over again. So like, are you sure this is what you want to accomplish? Are these the right people that you're inviting to this? And making sure that they're very clear. And you want to get them, especially with clients, you want to get them really specific. And then what's really important, once you've had this conversation, definitely would probably book like at least a half hour to an hour with them to have this conversation. Do a write-up. And making sure that you clearly outline what the ask is. This is a lot of problems when you're working with clients. You think you know what they want to have solved. They've told you what they wanted to have solved. You need to write it down and get them to sign off on it so that you're heading the right direction, because if for some reason they change their mind down the road, which happens a lot, you have in writing that this is what they're trying to solve. And yeah, you can pivot, but it also can help you monetarily too, because if you have contracted with a client for a certain amount of money and you tell them this is what you're going to solve and they change their mind, that's scope creep. Scope creep is another thing. Like, you start with a scope. This is what, like we said we were going to do. This is how much it's going to cost. Now you're telling me to do something else. I've already put all these hours in. Some of this is applicable, some is not. We're kind of starting over again. So there are a lot of key things, but really opening up that conversation. And a good really question for them, depending on how big the organization is like, what is their biggest fear? Good. I'm glad you already know about that. Ask them what their biggest fear that could go wrong. That opens up a whole dialogue. What's the best thing that could happen and what could horribly go wrong? Especially if you're dealing with organizations that have multi-layers. Are you worried about what your boss is going to think? Are you worried about your job? There's many different questions, and we can always talk privately, listen back to this recording, but really getting to what people's fears are, especially clients, can really help you navigate where they need to go. Because a lot of sometimes what we're trying to solve for people are hidden things that they don't even know. So the more you can get them to talk about that, the better, because it can help you position a solution. Did that answer some of your questions? Do you have anything more specific? Great. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad that was helpful. Are there any other questions before we end the call? You guys are so polite. All right. So thank you so much for those that spoke up and gave me their questions, Deborah, Yvette, and Loudon. I really appreciate that. And you can follow with me on anyone on this call at info@loamlife.com. Like I said, I'm offering a free discussion for anyone that participated. And the last thing I'll leave you with is something that's very important to me, which is the daily choice. And I feel in everything we do each day that we come to a place where we have to make a decision. It's our choice how we're going to be perceived, how we're going to position ourselves, how we can do things differently, because it's so easy to keep doing the same thing over and over again, as I call the definition of insanity. Well, I didn't call it, but someone else called it that, but I'm borrowing it. The definition of insanity that drives you crazy. And at those moments, we could decide to do something different. We can either be nicer to ourselves, try something different, but really change the course of direction that we've been kind of stuck on. It's leaving that tail behind, that story behind. So my daily choice and what I do on these calls and working with my clients, and it brings me actually so much joy, is that my daily choice is that in every word, deed, and action, I leave this world in a better place. And by participating in my world, by asking these questions, I hope that I've been able to impact you in a positive way. I really do love doing that. And I'll let you know that my next call is going to be on May 20th or 21st. We're going to try it on a Sunday because some people are saying it's hard for them to get there after work. And we'll be talking about the 7 signs of toxic workplaces and 5 powerful strategies to overcome them. So that will end my call. And I thank all of you for joining. And just every day know that you can always start in it. All right.